Welcome to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. I am your host, Emmy DeGrappa. Wyoming is called the Equality State because we were the first to give women the right to vote. 150 years later, we wonder what Wyoming women think about the progress toward equality now. Let's find out, and thank you for listening. Today, we are talking to Leticia Liera, also known as Lety. Lety migrated from Mexico City in 2001. She has a master's degree in systemic thinking, and she is the director of the Head Start program here in Jackson. Welcome, Lety.
Thank you, Amy.
Let's talk about your journey to Jackson. Why did you decide to migrate to our community?
I think it was a funny set of circumstances that happened at the same time. I came to Jackson just to visit, and I met some awesome people. They were struggling with the Latino population that was coming into the schools. And this really nice guy said, "Hey, you should come here and work with us." And I said, "Well, not really, because I'm doing really well in Mexico." I went back to Mexico. This is the year 2000. We are changing powers. We're going from one party to a different political party. So my car gets stolen. One of my practices gets robbed. I talk to my partner and I say, "Hey, I really need a sabbatical. I need a break from crazy Mexico City." And I called and said, "Hey, do you really want me?" And I came here for what I thought was going to be 1 year. It's been 18 years. I took a very long sabbatical from Mexico City.
But your family still lives there, right?
Yeah, my family is still there. And it's been a process. I really thought I was coming for first just a year. And then I said, well, I'm going to do the 3 years of my professional visa. And then you could renew the visa, though. So then it went into another 3 years. And then I got a green card. And then I thought, I really like my community. You know, I love Wyoming. I love the size. I love the fact that you can make change if you really work hard at it, because it's doable, especially in this community. This is an amazing community to live. Hard to live on one hand, but it has other amazing things. So it happened, Emmy. I actually became an American citizen, so I'm a proud Wyoming gal. My naturalization certificate is from Wyoming.
Now you're a Wyoming woman.
I know.
That is great. That's a great story. And what do you know about other parts of Wyoming? Because, you know, we're celebrating 150 years of women's right to vote, and we're coming up on it. But we want to talk about what have been the challenges for you as a woman, as a Latina woman, moving and migrating to this country. Did it feel different? And do you think there have been, has there been progress? You know, because we're also known as the equality state. Do you see the discriminations?
Well, more than the discriminations, I have the privilege and the honor of working with the Wyoming Head Start Association. So that association has allowed me to go to different parts of Wyoming. It has also allowed me to get to know people that even surprise me, Emmy. For example, in Rock Springs, we have an incredibly big Latino community, right? And there's one director in particular that I love. Her name is Bonnie, and her name is Bonita, right? She is probably a fifth-generation Latina. She doesn't speak any Spanish. She is totally a Wyoming gal, and is that piece of some heritage that maybe got lost in the shuffle. That I think sometimes it can make us stronger to know some other sense of where we came from. And then I am a very outspoken person, so I rarely think of myself as Latina in the sense of like a minority. I never see myself as a minority because I associate minority maybe with a as a word used for somebody who is not as present in the room, in that sense. So I never thought about it, but then I got reminded about it, right? Let me tell you one funny thing that happened to me. I was in this party when I very first came here, little kids in the party. A family just invited me, and this little girl couldn't figure out who I was. And she came looking at me, and when I spoke, she kept listening to my words and my accent. And finally, she came, and I'm talking about a 10-year-old, 11-year-old. She came to me and said, "When are you going to start doing the dishes?" And that little 10-year-old that didn't do it in a mean way, I just was not part of her expectation. She's probably the one person that I was not able to speak back to her and say, "Hey, so what's going in your family that you think I should do the dishes?" I don't know if it was maybe she had a maid that was Latina, and I totally shook her world just because I was part of the party. That was one part that reminded me that I am a minority, that I live in the equality state. But when I first arrived here, I was probably the only brown person in a room, depending on the context. So those are the moments when I go, oh my God, there's some work that needs to happen.
So you think of equality in terms of diversity, and do you think of it in terms of women's issues, where women don't get paid as much as men, or they haven't made the same strides as men have in their work in the workforce?
Mm-hmm. I think of inequality in several different aspects. I think my work has shown me that one of the parts that is very difficult, in addition of being a woman, is poverty. Poverty, I see it every day in the Head Start program, and poverty is the one thing that is not racist, right? I mean, if you are poor and you are a family and you're struggling, it doesn't matter how hard you work. Sometimes the system is set up in such a way that you're going to have a really hard time. And the way that I see it, Emmy, and then there are layers to it, right? If you, in addition of being poor, you happen to be a minority, you're going to have some other challenges. And then if you're poor, you're a minority, and you happen to be a woman. And also culturally, if you have not been taught to fight for what you think is fair, then that is going to just sink you farther. Because maybe I can think of some instances looking at the pay stubs of some of my families where women do get paid less. They do get asked to do more. And culturally, they're not taught to challenge that. So is that aspect of how much is the education piece, how much is the cultural piece, and I think is so complex, so complex. On the other hand, there are amazing organizations that are talking about equality, and it's just challenging. I think we all have to work from different aspects, and sometimes I believe that this American culture asks you to take sides, right? So you're a minority or you're the majority. You are a person of money or wealth, or you are poor. It's like this black or white. Are you this or are you that? And I think we are much more complex than that. And that's why we don't solve issues, because they are not one or the other.
Right. They're not black and white.
Mm-mm.
And every situation is different.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it is different growing up in a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a son, right?
I do have a son.
And how do you think his life has been different in terms of, how he would have been raised in Mexico as a young man versus how you're raising him here in Wyoming?
And I think that's a very appropriate question because it's the reason why I chose to be a Wyoming gal. Mexico is huge. It's beautiful. It has wonderful things, but the city has some very serious challenges. I think my heart has always been around social service and what you can do for others. And I couldn't see my life moving forward in Mexico City. When I arrived to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which I think that's the beauty of Wyoming, you know, on one hand, is this kind of culture of like get yourself up by your bootstraps, and there's a beauty that I love about that. I mean, there's something that I really really find pulling me because it's like, yeah, come on, let's work together, let's do it. We can make it, we can make a change. On the other hand, you are in a small town. I am so happy to live in Jackson, which compared to Mexico City is a very small town, and the life that Sebastian can have in this community is privileged. I think sometimes we forget that there are other places in the world where you cannot be outside at night, that your children cannot be free and play in the streets. So I'm going to guard that. I don't take let's see if this comes out properly, my Americanness, becoming a citizen of United States of America is something that I don't take lightly. I believe that I have a responsibility, I have a duty. I told Sebastian that if he ever forgets to vote when he is 18, it will be over my dead body. You have a voice here, which is amazing. And you have the size of a state where you can go to the office of NC and the staffers will talk to you. And that's something that is lost in the country where I'm originally from. And that is incredibly sad. And I think sometimes it's also that we forget that it's not only your responsibility, it's a privilege, because we still have a privilege. If you agree or if you don't agree, if you're on this side of the coin or the other side of the coin, you have the privilege to speak your thoughts, to talk about what is important to you, and you're able to do it in this wonderful country. And people cannot forget about that, even if they don't agree on the issues.
Right. And what is your advice to young Latina women that you meet and have the opportunity to mentor?
Oh my God, I'm so excited about that question. So I think we are in a moment where when I go to University of Wyoming, there's these mecha kids and they're smart and they have grown up. And I mean, they come from all over, but especially excited when they come from Jackson because that's my town. And they are 18, right? And they're going to be voting. And I just love the idea that they're going to be voting with their heads. And I hope that they keep from their families, especially if they are first generation Latinas in Wyoming, that they keep in the back of their heads that their parents make huge sacrifices for them to be in a country where they do have a voice, where being a woman does not dictate what you're going to do for your future. That you can go to a university, you can find a scholarship, you can have a dream, you can work hard at it, you can fail and you can try again. And I hope they keep that in the back of their minds because a lot of sacrifices happen for these kids to have the right to vote and choose what to do in their lives. I was just reviewing a video for another project, Emmy, and we were not even talking about voting. We were talking about school. We were talking about completing basic school, which in Mexico is 12th grade. And some kids cannot do that because they have to work. Sometimes you don't get your basic needs met and you have to go work. So the fact that we have programs here, we have Head Starts in this state, we have systems that maybe they're not perfect, but they're trying to address your space as a woman and your opportunities as a person. I would go beyond from just a woman to a person. It is a privilege. And we need to keep working on it. I don't think it's the responsibility of the government. I don't think it's the responsibility of organizations. I do believe in individual responsibility. That's why I'm a Wyoming girl.
I love that.
And then you can transfer some responsibility at certain appropriate level to organizations and government. But first of all is what you decide as a person.
That's right. Teaching people how to stand up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And since you do have a young man that you're raising, do you talk to him about the #MeToo movement and how,
totally.
Do you? What do you say?
So there's two things that I have talked to him. Poor thing, and he's going to be so embarrassed when he hears that. And that's my mom, right? So we talk about, he's 14, right? But we are talking about being responsible for your sexuality and what does that mean. And we also talk about the Me Too movement in the sense of what does this mean for you as a man, right? Because again, I love the fact that we have a Me Too movement. I love the fact that we are going for that. And at some level, it's kind of scary if you're raising a boy, right? Because you want to make sure that he understands that culture and what is appropriate for culture is these rules and this understanding that men and women are equal, that consent means consent, that the fear for me, Emmy, is that you also have to educate them, because this is the way that I think, and it might be a little bit controversial. I don't think all women are wonderful. I don't think all men are wonderful. I don't think all poor people are, poor people, they are so sweet. No. I think there's amazing people in every group that we label. I think there's amazing people and some people that are really scary. So for my son, I would be doing exactly the same thing as if he was a girl. I would be saying, you better be careful who you hang out with. You better be careful when you are older, I really, really hope older, when you consent to having a loving relationship with someone and having sex, I really hope he has a loving relationship with someone. That you understand what is consensual, that you understand the risks, and because if you cross paths with somebody that wants to hurt you, it will be very difficult in this context. So I think boys have to be very, very aware what they are doing, and they have to be very safe. And if I had a daughter, I would be telling her the exact same thing. You know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that is really good to hear, because it's not just for the girls, it's for the boys. It's not one message. It's a total message.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So again, is that part of me that is this a systemic message? It's not how are we raising girls, it's how are we raising everybody? How are we making a culture change that everybody can be comfortable, that everybody can be aware, and that nobody gets away with murder? I hope there's no murder.
Lety, you're so funny. Oh my gosh. Thank you for being here with me and for being a Wyoming girl.
I know.
Or a Wyoming woman.
I'm a Wyoming woman.
Thank you
for having me, Amy.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. Please join us again next week as we continue our conversations with women from around the state. You can also find us at thinkwy.org, where we continue the conversation on our blog about the history, journey, and the challenges of Wyoming's intrepid women living in the equality state. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review on iTunes. Thank you for listening.